All right. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Adam Clark. I'm the superintendent of the Mount Diablo Unified School District, and I'm so thankful and so happy that so many of you could join us this evening. As I'm looking at the numbers of participants, we are right around 121 participants, and so we're excited to see that. So this evening, we have an esteemed group of educators, counselors, and individuals who care deeply about our students here in the Mount Diablo Unified School District. And we are hoping to have an open conversation about mental health. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Aguili and Mrs. Stephanie Roberts. Take it away, please.
Welcome, welcome. My name is Stephanie Roberts. I'm the Director of Partnerships and MTSS, and I have been very lucky to work with the people that are on the panel today. So we just want to let you know what to expect for the next hour and a half. We have about 4 questions that we're going to share with the group. We're going to ask the questions and we have individuals on the panel that will answer. What we'd like to kind of get a sense of is who is joining us this evening. So in the chat, if you can, just put if you're a parent, you're a student, a staff member, what level, do you have a child at elementary, middle, high? That'll let our panelists also know who's here with us tonight. This whole event will be video recorded, and we will be sharing this recording on the district website, and we will be monitoring the chat. So if questions are coming up or you're wanting us to clarify something, we have our Director of Student Services, Felicia Stuckey-Smith, and our Chief of Pupil Services, Wendy Aguili, who will be watching and monitoring the chat. We are hoping to give about 15 to 20 minutes per question, and then we will be watching the chat to see what additional questions. We know that this is just the beginning. We're really excited about this, and we hope that this is going to be a series. So the questions that you're posing into the chat, as well as into a Google form that we'll add throughout this evening, we're going to gather the questions, and then that will help us guide what the topics are and what the conversations will be like in the future. So with that, I think we're going to get started. We're going to have you first just hear who's in the Zoom with us, and we're going to start with Megan.
Hi everyone, excited to be here. My name is Megan Popmasel, and I am the lead elementary counselor.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for attending. My name is Julie Grant, and I am the lead middle school counselor.
Hi everyone, my name is Rima Gujaude and I am the lead high school counselor.
Good evening, my name is Linnea Molina and I'm a behavioral health specialist, clinical leader.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Adriel Briscoe. I'm one of 2 counselors that work with the Equity and Disproportionality Department.
Evening, I'm Elise Mejia. I am the coordinator of the DCC, the Diablo Community Center at Mount Diablo High School.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Brown, the College and Career Advisor at Mount Diablo High School.
Hello, I'm Carolyn Sakis, the lead school psychologist.
Thank you so much. I want to just make a point that if you need translation, there is a little globe in the bottom right screen. You would just click on that and you'll be able to get translations in Spanish. So once again, if you need this in Spanish, and we can also type that into the chat, that there is a little globe icon that you would just click on, and that would let you know that you can get in and be able to hear everything in Spanish. Felicia and Wendy, did you just want to introduce yourself before we get started with the questions?
I'm Felicia Stuckey-Smith, Director of Student Services. I'd like to welcome everyone here. We have parents, nurses, principals, students on the call at this point, on the webinar at this point. So welcome.
Hello, and I'm Wendy Aguili, and I'm very pleased to say that I get to work every day with our group of counselors and mental health therapists, and I'm very pleased to be part of the panel this evening, and thank you all for joining us.
All right, well, let's get started. So one of our first questions, and these questions kind of came up with conversations with staff and parents. And so we know there's a lot more questions, but we wanted to just start with some 4 common ones. So the first one tonight, we have Brian, Carolyn, Megan, and AD are going to respond to this for you. How can parents and guardians create social opportunities for their children during distance learning? Brian, do you want to start?
Sure. Well, I'm the college and career advisor at Mount Diablo High School, and I'm also the faculty advisor for a few student clubs. So the one place I would say is a good starting point would be checking with your school and the student organizations and clubs at your school and within the community. That gives an opportunity for the students to communicate and connect with other students their age around similar interests. Also, intentional playdates, visits with friends or families, I would say is good. Just connecting with others. Again, intentional, meaning that, hey, I'll see you on Friday. Connect similar like you would if you were actually in person, just virtually. One of the things our student 12th graders did about a week or 2 ago was to create a watch party for movies. So a bunch of the students got together online and they watched Disney movies. I think it was Soul, and they kind of watched and they had conversations within the chat and they kind of just hung out together online and they shared that experience together. So that's a few different points there about connecting with other students and their age over similar interests.
You were muted, Stephanie.
Yep.
I'm not sure.
I was going to say,
Oh.
Carolyn, AD, and Megan, whenever you want to chime in, because I don't want to break up the flow of the conversation.
Well, it's funny when we were preparing and this question was asked of us, the first response that my first thought was as a parent, we are home with our children and we see our kids and we want them to have the social opportunities, and our hands are a little tied with them not being able to go to campuses to engage in those social activities. So, I sort of hit this in my head from the parent perspective. I think that kids can be encouraged to create ideas. I think sometimes they can be encouraged to take the lead for that. I know that there are some clubs happening. I think there's room for clubs to be created, especially with the flexibility, if you can think of it that way, of the Zoom option, because you don't have to transport your kids to places. There isn't that time commitment. You just set up a time to do it. I've heard of, Brian mentioned the watch parties around movies. I've heard of, kids engaging in activities together on screen, whether it be, video games. I've heard of a couple of different elementary level Lego clubs where the kids come together with something that they want to build with their Lego sets. And so they're on screen together and chatting as they do their Lego creations from home. It's a tough time that requires a lot of creative thinking, and I think it's really important to try to get those tap into those interests that your kids have. Another idea that I know came up with some middle school kids that I've talked to before are pen pals. Being able to engage with kids. Whether it be email or even snail mail, that's the getting a letter that's decorated, or learning about somebody, and that can even be something that kids bring up and convince their English teacher to engage in or something like that. So building those I don't know, just the creative aspects about how you can kind of twist an activity and make it a social dynamic. Also after school, like homework clubs, even if it's just getting together with friends. Well, I know it's on Zoom again, and that isn't always great, but being able to just socialize and be a study group together to get your homework done, just to hang out, do the small talk that you would do sort of organically around that. So those are some ideas.
Thank you, Carolyn and Brian. I think you guys covered a lot of a lot of the things. But I know there's a lot of parents that are watching right now. If you know that your child is usually social and maybe you're noticing now that they have way less social time, I encourage you to reach out to your school counselor at your school, because that is what we love to do. We love to reach out to the kids and maybe create a small group with them, and that group can just be us playing games or something. But since we have access to your kids all day long, we would love to be that person for you guys. And then just another thing to remember is what the kids are missing is a lot of that social time, like at lunchtime, for example, when they're just with their friends and they're not with their parents or any adults. And so creating those opportunities for them, maybe at home too, where they can, I don't know, be playing Minecraft or Among Us or something without that an adult sitting with them, even though I know we are at home, and just to kind of facilitate that normal social time that they usually get, you know, passing periods or at recess or lunchtime. On to you, AD.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. Yeah, just piggyback on what Megan and everyone said. I mean, these are tough times. We know that there are difficult times. You know, it's not easy being social distance and not being able to interact, because part of human nature, we have to engage. We have to interact with each other. I mean, that's just part of life, right? And so I do think that just the idea of, you know, even like was mentioned about possibly, you know, watching movies through Zoom, you know, with friends, or even doing study groups through Zoom, you know, where friends are interacting. Like, hey, like Carolyn mentioned about the homework club. You know, you can probably do like a homework club with a group of friends or what have you, and then your students can engage and say, hey, how you figure out this problem? Well, I did this, and they can utilize the technology. One thing we do know is that our students, this generation, they're going to be so savvy with technology and how to access it and how to be innovative. And of course, they have a lot of practice right now. We know it could be like a burnout, like just dreading, just constantly being on screen. However, just having interactive activities and also, you know, an example maybe is even taking little breaks where students could do a little exercise breaks. I mean, you know, with their friends, where they could do push-ups, you know, make it be a competition. How many push-ups you can do in a minute? All right, okay, now we're back on Zoom. Now we're gonna finish playing this game. So all sorts of things, and understanding that we have to have grace. Parents, you know, give yourselves grace, because this is not easy, as well as guardians. And but you're not alone. And we want you to know that the Zoom platform, the Google, this technology, it is set up to a point where we can still have some type of interaction. And even if your child is playing a video game by themselves, encourage them to be able to play with a friend through Zoom, because they need that interaction.
Thank you, AD. I know that we have a couple of questions in the chat. Wendy or Felicia, is there anything that's popping out that we could address to this question?
One particular question has to do, I'm sorry, Wendy, has to do when a child has lost interest in Zoom. What recommendations would you make? When a kid has not plugged in, or how do you get them to plug back in when they're afraid, for instance, of COVID, they're not around their friends, but are there any programs that are recommended? Any PE options?
So let's see if we can kind of answer that one question. That first question about
lost interest in Zoom.
Okay. Does
I would suggest that having constant conversations with your kids, just about, you know, what things like what is working well, what is not working well, what is it that you would like? You know, maybe I know, speaking to some kids, they're very concerned about, you know, social relationships aren't the same. You can't just see somebody in the hallway and go hang out with them. So it takes a little bit of effort to get that done. You know, there isn't always a lot to talk about, but ask your students what is it that they're interested in. You know, think about the fact that, like, you know, play dates, like I mentioned the Legos idea, or we've talked about video games. When kids would get together before COVID, they would sit there still facing the thing that they were facing, the Lego set or the video games, and they would just do the side chats. It's kind of the same thing, not having to, you know, be face to face and stare at each other through a screen, but just sort of be there in the same, you know, you can't be in the same room. So the Zoom room is kind of the closest you could be. but to encourage finding those activities that they do like, and then seeing if there one person that you can engage with. Is there one friend who's also interested in art that might be willing to watch a YouTube and be on with you and do that? Sometimes FaceTime works out well too. Sometimes a phone call. I mean, you know, just get on the phone and chat on the phone while you're doing something. So I'll stop talking.
Great. Anyone want to add to that? Or any last minute thoughts specific to this kind of question?
I'll add to that. It's just one thing that really popped up is there's actually, this is still technologically based, but there's an app called Marco Polo. And it's where you leave like a quick video message and your kids can send it to their friends. And like whenever you're feeling like it, you can look at it. And whenever you're feeling like it, you can respond. So it's a fun way to sort of like play virtual tag, but you don't have to stare at a screen the entire time. So it's just like a fun little resource.
There was a question in the chat, just will this video be available? Yes, we will send this video out to everyone that, I believe that everyone that's joined, and then we'll also put it on the district website. Our hope is that we'll be able to start creating a library of these resources so we can rewatch and, oh, I remember, you know, Miss Grant mentioned this, I'm gonna go back and watch that video. So, I mean, we're hoping that this is gonna conversation. And, you know, I could share on behalf of my family, we play a lot of board games. We're going to go back to like having conversations. And yes, we know it's technology and everybody's tired of being behind the screen, but we've seen some good recommendations and suggestions in the chat around encouraging our staff to allow that time for the breakout groups in Zoom, to allow the students to talk to each other instead of them just having to listen to the presentation. Wendy, is there any last minute things that are showing up in the chat that we should address before we move on to the next question?
I think the two recurrent themes that I'm noticing are that parents are asking if we can find a way that we could share other parent contact information, you know, much like typically you would run into parents as you're dropping your kids off and arrange a play date. And so what would that look like? So that's something that we could work with our sites on. And the other thing is if the district could centrally organize some of the social activities outside of school hours. So those seem to also be recurrent themes.
Okay. Can I add one, Stephanie, which you're an expert in, the request for after-school activities?
Mm-hmm.
And when we, as a district, will roll that out or share that with families.
Okay. I think as Dr. Clark has shared, until we are out of purple, you know, once we get into red, I think these small learning hubs for socialization and enrichment, that's when the CARES expanded learning program would start to provide some direct face-to-face services, but we're really looking at trying to be creative around how do we get our students back on campus safely. So yeah, at this point in time, nothing specific, but once we are back into the red, I know that we will be ready and rolling to try to get our students connected. All right, last thing for the panel. Any last minute thoughts for that first question about creating social opportunities for children during distance learning? Before I move on to the next one.
Yeah, again, with the Zoom, I know that this is something we might touch on as we move along. Zoom and Google Meets, all these are just platforms, and I know that we're tired of them, but at the same time, I think our feelings, we can put it, when we use the tool, it's a tool, and we attach positive feelings to it, then I think the students will also start to associate positive feelings with it when we start using it in different ways. So that's just the thing. I know it's difficult, but for the foreseeable time, I think it's something that we're just trying to figure out how to use it positively and creatively in a different manner from the study. So we can attach some more positive feelings to Zoom and Google Meets and other platforms like it. So as we come up with more of those ideas, hopefully we can roll those out to you guys out there, the parents, and create more of these clubs and opportunities.
Well, and it might be something as we're brainstorming on the parent portal. We definitely want to draw your attention to the district's parent portal. We're trying to put resources on there for you. So maybe we can create some fun ideas to do remotely for socialization on there specific to this topic. So we can work on that as well. Okay, I'm going to move on to question number 2. This is, we have Julie, Lania, and Elise that are going to respond to this question initially. How can I find support for children's social emotional well-being within the Mount Diablo Unified School District?
Thank you, Stephanie. I will go first. So the first thing I would direct you to do in order to get social emotional support for your child's well-being is to connect with your school counselor. They are a great resource. They are mainly at all school sites. If you do not have a school counselor at your specific site, and I think some elementary schools do not, there is a district counselor that is assigned to your school. So they are a great contact for direct and indirect support for your child, and your school counselor can provide the support themselves, or they can point you in the direction of valuable resources that may be helpful. So that is the first thing I would advise you to do if you're looking for that social emotional support. Our counseling department also has an extremely thorough website. We will share all the resources from this meeting in a slide at the end of this presentation, so you'll be able to get the links. That is an additional source you can go to for district and community resources. And our website is kept up to date so that the information you find there is most current. The last thing I will say is our counseling department also publishes a monthly counseling newsletter with relevant topics to support student needs. So it is another good source for parents as well.
Thanks, Julie. And I would say that regarding all the resources that we have in the district, we have phenomenal resources. And the fact that you can walk onto any campus and really access a mental health provider is amazing. And so I want to add a layer to that. And there's sort of like a backdoor approach to getting social emotional support as well. And it doesn't matter if your student is in kindergarten or 12th grade, but asking them who they are connected to on campus can really go a long way. Like, who supports you? Who do you feel connected to? Who do you talk to the most? And sometimes it's actually not a teacher. It's like the yard duty person from before COVID or the lunch lady. And so asking your child who they really feel most connected to is a great way to find support for 2 reasons. One, the connection with them can be supportive. And then number 2, they can actually help you and your family navigate the formal system. Often there's a referral system or a way to access office hours, and that staff member will know how to sort of get you there if you need that support. And so I would say having that conversation with your student about who they're connected with, and if you already know, you yourself reaching out to that staff member to get you connected to the counselor on your campus.
Thanks, Linnea. Another thing I wanted to add is parents, you are like, you have this relationship with your students, and you know them, when they're not feeling themselves and when you need to reach out for more support. So don't discount that. You trust your children, and so we want to support you, and we're here. We have a lot of support people at school. So like Linnea was saying, you can walk on campus and you can access that support right away. So I'll speak to at the high school level. I think that most sites do have a coordinated care team, and that's where we discuss situations that come up. If you have concerns, you can talk to your teacher about it. If your student is having concerns, hopefully they'll be able to reach out to someone. But this is a time where we can all come together and talk about resources, avenues on ways to support the student. And then we can make a big plan on how we're going to support them. And this is a great time to talk to teachers and to talk to all of the support staff. Another person that I also want to remind you that we have on at school is the parent liaison. They're a great resource. They typically know all of the students by name. So definitely remember to reach out to them. But we are here. We want to support you. But don't forget that You know your child best. And we have to, I read in the chat something about Slacker Mom, and that really stood out to me because as a parent, you know, you want to do your best and you're working so hard, and it's easy to forget that you're doing your best. And so I just want to remind you that we're all in this together, and just to keep that in mind. So I think that's all that I have.
One of the things that I'm seeing in the chat as well is there are some schools that might not have a parent liaison or may not have as much site counselor support. I think you definitely want to work with your teacher and your principal. Your principal and your teacher will navigate those additional resources. I think we also need to give ourselves some grace as parents. We're trying to be parent and teacher and not sure how to fix everything. And so trying to find that person that Linnea had shared that the student feels connected to, or you feel connected to, that you can ask your questions to. And I think there was one of the comments that said, you know, what if we ask and we don't respond? Yeah, please keep asking. Try to find somebody that is going to be able to help. I mean, you've got all of us on this Zoom. We will help navigate that as well. But we also know we've got amazing principals. We have amazing front office staff. We have wonderful teachers. Try to find one person that's going to be able to help you get those answers, because our kids need us. Your kids need us. And we're wanting to figure out how we can support them in this trying times. Wendy, do you see anything in the chat that we need to kind of follow up on specifically with this question?
I'm seeing parents again asking for lists of resources and what to do if their questions are going unanswered at the site. And so the answers that were given by our panelists were that we're certainly trying to compile the list of resources, some of which have been shared in the chat, but we'll certainly put them together into a single document. And then obviously to continue reaching out, and then if they need further assistance, go ahead and reach out to our central offices who can help them find other supports.
Okay, great. The resources, of course, will also be on the parent portal tab on the district website. We're trying to house most of the social emotional supports on that page, as well as under student services, but we'll continue to try to get that out to families so that they know where to find them. But we're trying to make it in just in one or two locations so that it's easy for families to find. For the panelists, is there any last minute thoughts on this question? Okay. All right, we're moving along. So this is question number 3. We've got Megan, Carolyn, Elise, AD, and Julie. We've heard a lot from parents around, they said they are afraid their child is failing or falling behind academically. How can I best support him or her during this trying times? And we've had feedback on they're failing because of their social emotional health. They're failing partially because distance learning isn't working for them. They're not sure exactly why they're failing, but parents are feeling helpless because they don't know how to help their child. So we're looking to you all to give us some guidance and thoughts. Why don't we go with you first, Julie?
Go ahead, Julie.
Yeah.
Okay. So first and foremost, we want to acknowledge that this is a stressful time for families and students, right? And we are very much aware of that. And the word grace is going to come up a lot in this conversation because we're asking for parents to give themselves grace, students to give themselves grace as well. So all students are having to participate in distance learning across the district and are experiencing various degrees of success. That being said, one of the best ways you can support your child is to remind them that they are not alone in this distance learning process, right? All of our students are experiencing this with them at the same time. So another way is to encourage them to communicate with their teachers. Now more than ever, communication is huge and communication is key. Technology can be highly reliable at times. We've all experienced it. You know, we turn on our camera, we lose our voice. Sometimes students wake up and they have no internet. Worse, maybe they have no electricity, right? So they aren't able to access their classes. That is when it is important to communicate that to their teachers. So they can email their teacher when they're able to, or they can call the school office. So it is very important to have that ongoing communication with their teacher so they know what's going on. If the student is not communicating, if parents are not communicating with the teacher, then they just think that students are not showing up for class, but usually there is more to it than that. So one way is also to continuously acknowledge everything that your child is doing right now. Maybe they're not passing all their classes. Maybe they're struggling, right? But this is a time to kind of encourage them. They're waking up each day, they're attending their classes online, right? So that is something that should be recognized and commended. So even if they're not getting straight A's, it is important to just acknowledge that they're engaging in some way in school during this time, even with all of the added stressors that are going on around them.
Thank you, Julie. Megan, you want to go next?
Yeah, thank you, Julie. I think it's, like Julie said, it's really important to remember when I talk to parents all the time now during the pandemic, that it is not just your child that's having a hard time. It's most children. And I think, we can all agree this is hard for everyone, but a really important conversation you can have with your kid is to kind of figure out why. Are they shy on video? Are they anxious to speak on video? Do they have Zoom fatigue? Are they anxious about what's going on in the world? And kind of to figure out what's going on beneath that is an individual conversation you can have with your student. And then, like Julie kind of mentioned, just a little hands-on thing that you can do with your kid is after school is out, 2:15 or whatever it is at your level, sit down with your kid before dinner, carve this out every single day. Let's say 5 o'clock every day, we sit down for 10 minutes and we write down 3 things that went well. And that means as a parent, you're writing down 3 things that went well for you in your day. And it's kind of a time for you guys to be, you and your student to be on the same level. You both, we all have a very different life than we did a year ago. And maybe you do this with the whole family, write down those 1 to 3 things and then share it out and celebrate the small successes. Like Julie said, I made it to 3 of my Zooms today. That's great. And that's a lot more than some kids have done. So just taking those times to celebrate that small time or the small successes can kind of just help change the mood for the evening. So I encourage you to give that a try.
Thank you, Megan. We have Carolyn, Elise, and AD. Carolyn, go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the things that I was going to bring up is something similar to what Megan said. And sometimes that's sort of what I like to call peeling back the onion layers, is talking to your kids. What is going right? What is going wrong? What is frustrating? Sometimes this takes a few conversations to kind of get out from them what it is that's so difficult about it. Maybe, as it's been said, it's Zoom fatigue, or it's just not liking the scenario of having to do online school. Maybe it's not understanding the lessons. Maybe the teacher's going too fast. Maybe there's something else that's going on. Motivation can be a really big factor in being successful at school, and you can lose motivation even from the smallest thing. So trying to have repeated conversations with your student about what's going on. You won't get the right answer or even a great answer the first time you ask. Sometimes it's an ongoing conversation about what it is. Sometimes it's just about listening and being empathetic to what they're saying, and then try to figure out what it is they're saying. Kids have a really hard time hitting the nail on the head, so to speak. And so you really have to pay attention to what they're saying and what gets repeated. Recognize that behavior is a form of communication. So if you have a student who's feeling very frustrated one day, take a second, calm down. Let's think about let's just figure out what just happened right now. What triggered that to happen? And again, they might not, depending on the age, and even the older kids, when they're emotionally driven, will have a hard time saying it. Using teachers as a resource. My kid is really struggling in this class. Is there another way that we can do this? Or maybe there's some aspect of the lesson. Maybe your child is struggling in reading and the teacher's asking them to read a little bit more than your student can handle. Talk to the teacher. What is it that we can do instead? I also think, and I think that we have district people on this website, it would probably, or on this webinar, it would probably be a really good opportunity for the district to also put out the message like, hey, we are all struggling. This is all really difficult. And let's keep talking, because there's been a couple of comments in the chat about kids not being able to like do the fun social things to keep them engaged with school because they have to go make up some lessons or something. It's like, okay, let's figure out that we not do that. Let's not turn kids away even on the fun things. Because that can decrease motivation and that can affect the academic outcome.
Thank you.
Those are all really good resources. One thing I just wanted to, I won't speak for too long because I think that you guys said a lot, but I just want to acknowledge that this is a really difficult time. And we're not making the assumption that all of the families have the same resources as everyone. So some parents might not be around to supervise their children. Some older siblings have to take on the brunt of the work. And you know, there's all kinds of other life circumstances that prevent you from being present. So we hear you. This is very challenging, but we also want to know what's going on. So bring those questions to us, talk to us. Most teachers have office hours. Maybe not all schools have school counselors, but do they have a social worker? Do they have a school psych? You know, a lot of our, you know, the admin, they're super involved, and everyone who, you know, everyone who works at the school really cares. So just remember, you can always come to us, and we want to hear about what's going on in your life. We want to know how we can make it easier, how we can work together collaboratively so that your child can be successful.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to piggyback on what Elise said is that you know, we're in some trying times right now. And you know, for one thing, as a parent, even for myself, and you know, and with my children, you know, you know, they don't quite understand my 3-year-old, but then my 9-year-old about to be 10, he don't quite understand as well. But I think he understands more than my 3-year-old as far as the challenges, the times that we're living in. But you know, I think we have to go back to the basics, even as families and as parents, to your core values, like what grounds you. And a lot of times, if anything, this pandemic have taught us a whole lot as far as especially patience, right? Because we have to be patient with Zoom, we have to be patient with work, we have to be patient with going to the grocery store, you know, and everything. And we also learned to be, we learned to be even more resilient during this time frame. And I will say this, that your families, the families, what we're experiencing right now is history. So we're writing the history books right now as we speak. And all what's going on socially with the injustice, I think is important that you go back to your core values, even if sharing about your ancestors, the time frame, the experiences they went through, how they overcame and they triumphed, and at the same time, it's a reminder of who you are as an individual. And I think it's important for our children to understand their story, that they do have a part of the story in this fabric of what we consider, you know, of this quilt of America, meaning that their fabric, they will have an imprint. And so it's important that we talk about the core values, because we're going to be struggling. And if an example would be is if it's hard work, if it's we're resilient, very resilient as a family. Anytime you having those challenges come up academically, well, you have to go back and say, you know what, our family, and I use my last name, Briscoe, we're resilient. So regardless of the challenges, we're still going to fight through it. But at the same time, I like what was mentioned earlier, communication is important. You have teachers, we have hardworking teachers who are working very hard. I mean, teachers having sleepless nights because they don't understand why students are not being successful, and they're struggling. But I think it's important that we're in this together. It's important that we all work together. It's important that we all communicate. I think it's important to communicate to the teachers and say, hey, look, this is the challenges. And I tell you this, even in the office hours, take advantage of those office hours that the teachers offer, because folks didn't get an education. Most people did not get an education to fail students or for students not to be successful. We got an education because we want to save lives and we want to change lives. We want to support the well-being of humans overall. So we we got into this field to make great contributions, but so I encourage that we work together and communicate, which is so key. And that was the word that was mentioned earlier throughout this presentation, is communication. Please communicate.
Thank you, AD. Is there, Wendy and Felicia, do you see any questions that maybe the panel can add to?
I'm very intrigued because we've had some students chime in on this one and really want to know how they can support their younger siblings and also their parents as they navigate this situation. And we've had some who are really interested in supporting each other too. And I'm really happy to see that our kids are really wanting to be part of the solution. We are having a lot of calls for more counselors across the whole district at different school sites. And one question that I really wanted to address was that a parent asked if their child does consult with a counselor, will that become part of their child's permanent record?
Okay. Does anyone want to address any of those questions first?
Can I say one thing? One of those questions were, and of course, you can all jump in at any time, but as one thing we're fortunate in this district, the fact that we have counseling program, which is an extension of the education services that's provided for all students. And I think that's the beauty, right? So the fact that we have counselors that work in elementary, even though some sites, some schools have additional resources based on equity. But the fact that it's an extension of the education services is there to help support all students.
One of the things that I think, as you mentioned, there is so much counseling services needed. And so we also want to recognize and let you know that the counselors at the school, the principals, the psychs, one of the other things that we do is really connect to community resources that are available to our families and our students. I mean, ideally, the job of our education is to educate the kids, and we want to make sure that we're preparing them and supporting them socially, emotionally, and for college and career and academics. So when and if they need additional counseling support that's beyond more of the short term that we can provide as school counselors and psychologists and social work specialists, we definitely are very knowledgeable about community resources that we would also share. So if I noticed a few people in the comments that are making connections with other resources in the community. If you know of something that's in our area that could be beneficial for our families and students to know, I would highly encourage you to share that information with any one of us on this panel or your school counselor or school psychologist, because we definitely want to be aware of that. And I think it's going to take a village for us to serve our students. And if we aren't working collectively and collaboratively, we're going to miss some things. So I just wanted to add that because I did see a little bit of that. Is there anything else that people wanted to add regarding the clarifications or kind of a last minute thought to this question?
If I can add a last minute thought, I've seen a couple people in the chat, basically say something to the effect of, worried about kids being behind next year, throwing out retention ideas. Please don't forget that everybody is in this boat of some form of struggle. And that is district-wide, it's across districts, it's across the state, and it's across the nation. Different school districts have different things that they will be tackling. There are conversations about how to support kids as we navigate back in, whether it be transitions, emotionally and physically, back onto the campuses, as well as, trying to meet those academic needs, because they are vast and the district is already aware of that need at this point. So just wanted to add that.
Okay, anyone else?
Stephanie, there's a couple of questions that come up. One has to do with motivating a child, a student who's unmotivated. Another relates to kids that are ADHD. So how do we support students as well as families in addressing some of their needs and supports?
Okay, thank you. That was a perfect segue to the fourth question, Felicia, or whoever the viewer shared. Our fourth question is, my child is lacking motivation during the pandemic. How can I support and help him or her become more engaged in their class and just kind of in general? We have Linnea, Julie, and Rima. So I'll say that one more time. My child is lacking motivation during the pandemic. How can I support and help him or her become more engaged in their classes or in just life?
Thank you, Stephanie. Before we give you the tangible interventions that you can do, I just want to underscore something that's been said time and time again, and I think it's worth repeating, is that sometimes despite all of the best practices out there during this time, we do have to give ourselves grace. I think that's the fifth time it's been said, but it's because it's so true. And often any intervention takes time, and you're probably doing the best that you can. And so I just, as a parent to another parent, like that's everything that we're talking about tonight, the way you implement it, the way you approach your student, approach the teachers, you have to have that lens of patience and grace that we keep bringing up time and time again. And so it's also important to underscore that you may have heard this elsewhere, but everyone is sort of grieving during this COVID-19 process. We're grieving the loss of the life we had, the friends we hung out with, the experience we had in the classroom. And so a normal part of grief is sort of withdrawal and just like pulling back. And so some of the things that you're seeing are very sort of normal. And but the good news is they're temporary because we are getting through this and this is sort of a process. So I'm not saying give up. I'm not saying that. I'm saying keep trying, but knowing that this is temporary. But also you're not alone. We mentioned before the resources you can tap into, the teachers, the counselors. So I just wanted to preface before we went into like, you can do this and you can do that. We know you're doing the best you can.
We have Julie and Rima. We're going to add a little.
Just had to unmute there. So just want to acknowledge that motivation is always a concern with a lot of our students, even during times when we are in person. It's a top concern. So, and in distance learning, to have kids get motivated is even harder, right? So that now that students are not able to meet in person, it's even more of a concern. So just kind of like what Linnea said, these are not normal circumstances where we're asking kids to engage in school and in learning. So one of the, I know for me, I'm at a middle school, I'm at El Dorado Middle School, I'm a counselor there. And one thing we have noticed when it comes to kids being engaged is that if the big question is if students are able to have their cameras on during their classes, we have seen that that their grades are actually reflective of that engagement. Now, we know that not every student is able to turn on their camera during class, so cameras on is only one way of students being engaged. Another way is utilizing the other things that they have. For example, they can utilize the chat to show that they are being engaged in class. They can to communicate with their teacher. So chatting with the teacher is another way of showing their engagement. Also, there are non-academic activities happening at school. We definitely want students to participate in their academics. But if there is a way for them to be motivated to engage that is non-academic as well, we encourage that. So most schools have something non-academic happening, like clubs or lunch bunches or Wellness Wednesdays. If you don't know about these things at your school, you can connect with your counselor, and sometimes teachers as well will be able to connect you with them. So I do think that if we can get students, if let's say they're not always engaging academically, if we can get them to engage in some non-academic activities, that can also be a way they can still be involved in their school community.
Linnea and Julie, that was really beautifully said. I couldn't say it better myself. Something I tell a lot of students and parents is, I think the one thing we can all agree on is that motivation is one of the hardest things to tackle, and the struggle is very real right now. I would say that the same things that we were able to do with ease are maybe 10 times harder to do in this kind of current world that we're in. But with that being said, every little bit helps. So it's not about, okay, I did everything perfect this day. It's kind of like Megan was saying earlier, celebrating the small successes. And there are little tips and strategies and habits that can help with motivation. Even getting out of bed sometimes seems like an impossible thing to do. And in normal circumstances, you'd be up, your student would be up out of bed well before school has started. They've brushed their teeth, they've gotten dressed, maybe they took a shower, maybe they ate some breakfast. But now you could literally just wake up 1 minute before your Zoom and, sit in front of the Chromebook and be ready to go. And that temptation to do that is, sounds nice in the beginning and sounds nice on paper, but usually kind of leads to a sort of spiral of, even less motivation, because you're waking up, you're kind of groggy, you're not really ready to go, and it makes it harder to engage with the classes. So even though you don't have to get up, 30, 40 minutes before class, that routine is pretty good for us, mental health wise. So I would definitely recommend, kind of, if some of that routine went away as school has changed, bringing some of that back can be helpful. And, everyone's situation is very different. So not everyone has a separate space they can step into and, be distraction free and all of those things. But it is worth taking a moment to sort of brainstorm, is there a way I can sort of separate my workspace from the rest of my life? Maybe there's not too much separation available, but maybe it's when my class is over, I close the Chromebook and I walk away. I'm not sort of always in the same mind space and physical space as my schoolwork. I have some either a mental or physical separation from my work, just for our own mental health and sanity. If you are checking in with friends, maybe it will be not in the same place that you do your schoolwork, just so it feels a little bit different. Maybe it's still a Zoom, maybe it's a house party on your phone, but it's not, sitting in front of your Chromebook in that corner that you do your math homework or something like that. So those are some things that help me personally as an adult that's trying to navigate through this. And just, I have so much, honestly, I'm inspired by some of the students that I talk to and think like, how are you doing this? What is working for you? There are some tips and strategies out there. And I really think those two, routine and, trying to create some physical or mental space separation, are two that I found pretty helpful.
For the panel, are there any additional thoughts that you would want to add to this before we go to the chat and see if there's some additional clarifying questions that we can go deeper in?
Oh, sorry, Wendy. Oh, okay. I think the one thing that I said that kind of helps with the motivation. So I deal with work. I deal with a lot of high school students, but at home I have elementary and middle school students there. So some things I would say definitely to keep motivation and energies high. Words of affirmation, letting them know that it's tough, but that means that they're tough. And then sometimes we have to just, I sit there with them, go through it together with them, and then we create short-term goals. I think a few times AD, I think Carolyn at the very top of the meeting, we kind of alluded to it, but it's, the short-term goals. What is something we're gonna do? What is something we can accomplish? With the work that I do with the high school students, oftentimes we look at colleges, and so we look ahead to what we want to prepare for. Sometimes we'll log in to these virtual college tours that are often nowadays interactive, and they include student panels where we can ask questions. So we think, okay, well, if I want to get there, I need to at least do this this much in my classes, or I need to talk to my teacher a little bit more to bring that grade up so I can get there. So that kind of helps us when we focus on a goal, that even if we're having some difficulties or struggles, we at least are aware of some of the things that we need to do. And it gives them, sometimes it gives them something else to think about, when, instead of all the negatives of the Zooms and everything else, it's what can I still do, knowing that everybody's going through the same thing. What can I try to do that's gonna move me forward, move me up, get me through this? Sometimes, again, it's like I said, I like the words of affirmation, and then also just being there for one another. There's a lot of conversations where I heard with my nephew. He's in middle school, 7th grade. He's just saying "good job" to someone else in his class, and a lot of those things mean a lot. I saw him smile. So being able to watch some of the behaviors, and listen to the language, I think helps, and with the motivation a lot.
Thank you, Brian. Was there another panelist that we're sharing, or were you adding something?
I just wanted to add some information from the notes that one attendee shared that he had used a trampoline, and maybe that works for some kids, but certainly sensory devices in their hands might be helpful. Rubber bands, paper clips, something they can kind of fiddle with and get focused on. Another parent suggested that if students were required to use cameras, they might be more motivated to participate. And we've also had a group of parents really express how will we help them process this when they do have to return to school, and get remotivated to shift back into that gear too. So those seem to be things that are recurring.
Okay.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes.
Just one quick thing. I just wanted to remind you that positive reinforcement is also key. So a lot of times it's easy to catch our children when they're, not doing the right thing, or maybe they're not paying attention, but just to stay alert and try and find those times when they are paying attention. That goes a long way. And just to give them a pat on the back, or to say, I noticed what you were doing, and that was, you're doing a really good job. That goes a long way for elementary, high school. I know some people have said, I can't have these conversations with my high schoolers, but they do want to feel appreciated and feel like they're doing a good job too.
Right.
Thanks,
Well,
Stephanie.
I agree. I mean, sometimes it's just celebrating the small successes. And when students, as an adult, when you make a goal and you've reached part of it, it's a confidence builder. It gives you that motivation to try a little bit harder that next time. I mean, I have a high school sophomore, and just a week of non-missing assignments is a win in the Roberts household. I mean, we are excited. And if we focus on the 10 missing assignments that he has, it just becomes a negative interaction with a parent. But when we look at that and we're like, wow, I screenshotted his grade that said he had 0 missing assignments, and we were all like so excited in our household. So I think sometimes celebrating those small wins helps with motivation. And then sometimes, like reaching out to your counselor or a teacher and saying, hey, it would really help if you, commented on how great Megan was doing in her math class. Utilizing the resources that we have. If you know that a special conversation by AD is going to make your child feel better, reach out to us. We're happy to have those great conversations. So that's what I've been doing. And I know that a lot of our fellow counselors and parents that are in the Zoom, we're trying to be brainstorming around what we can do differently, because we have to do things differently. I also wanted to make one mention. I did put a link to the parent portal where it has all of the counselor contacts. So for some of the chats, people were saying, well, we don't know who to call. I've called so-and-so. Every school has a counselor contact. So you could always start there, and then they can help you kind of get connection. So if you're still hitting that wall where you're reaching out and nobody's responding, that's where you're going to find a school counselor contact. And that could be one person to at least enter into. And then the last thing I would just add is I just added it into the chat as well. We've seen a lot of questions that have come up in the chat. Anxiety, ADD, how are we going to help the students when we come back to school? Those to us are really like an entire topic for a future panel. So in that Zoom chat, I did add a link to, we're gathering these questions. We're going to look at the chats. We're going to try to see what are some themes for future panels, because we knew we couldn't answer everything this first go around. We wanted to kind of get a feel for what was the need and the interest from our students and our parents and our community. And this will help to inform how we can meet you and support you in these future questions that come forward. So I know it may not feel like we've answered everything, but we tried to give you kind of like an appetizer of what might be able to happen in the future. But we're doing pretty good on time right now. We had around 6:15 to 6:30 scheduled, but so we might have a little bit of time there are some key questions that are themes that have shown up, Wendy, that maybe we can kind of put out there to the panel. And then if there's any last minute thoughts from the group, or then we'll have a little bit of time to do that.
Can I add one thing to the last question that was said? And it's sort of piggybacking on what Stephanie and Elise said about the positive acknowledgement, but especially I think I saw a question about for the younger kids is if you actually have like a behavior chart or like some sort of incentive tracker, and the incentive can be free or cost money depending on your judgment as a parent. But if you have it on the fridge or somewhere where everyone in the family sees it all the time, you can actually have your child, you know, when they do something positive, go up and put that little marker, put a dot, put a star, a sticker, and they're working towards something, and you're getting to acknowledge the positive thing at the same time, and everyone in the family sees it. So that's sort of like a tangible, concrete thing you can put up for your student, and maybe you can even make the tracker with them, find them on Pinterest, everywhere, but really great idea just around the positive behavior acknowledgement.
Also, can I add something to piggyback on what Linnea said, is that we do have students that are doing actually better on distance learning than they did before the pandemic. So I do want to celebrate that, acknowledge that we do have students that are being successful. And there are some things with distance learning that's actually, I am hoping that we be able to bring when we do go back in person, as far as the engagement, as far as the check-ins, as far as, you know, having these small group breakouts rooms or what have you. If anything, what I have heard from teachers were that they got an opportunity to seem like they got an opportunity to interact with the parents more based on distance learning than they have in person, face to face. So there are some few things. Of course, nothing is perfect. Our education system was not designed for us to be on distance learning. So we do know that you know, there's some things that we have to tweak. But at the same time, I'm hoping what just having this platform like this is amazing. And the fact that, you know, a pandemic, a distance learning had created this opportunity for us to interact and get engaged and to communicate with families with resources. I think this is a great tool, and it has a lot to do with us distance learning. I mean, this is where we came about. So I appreciate all the resources, and I appreciate for us having this platform.
Thank you. Other thoughts?
Yeah, I'd like to add something. I know this came up a couple questions ago. I know there is maybe a student put it in the chat, you know, how do I take care of my parent or my younger siblings? And I know we have a lot of parents watching, but I just want to encourage all the parents out there that I know are having just as hard of a time as the students, is how are you taking care of yourself? And that can be 1 minute a day, can be 1 hour a day. At the end, we will put on the slide of our counselor website. There's a ton of stuff on there, whether it's like watching penguins at the San Diego Zoo, or it's cooking a meal, or it's going on a walk around the block. I don't know, whatever floats your boat for taking care of yourself. I really, really encourage you guys to do that. And it's good for us, but it's also really, really good as a role model for our students, for them to see what self-care means and how it can help our mental health.
Thank you, Megan. Any other thoughts from the group? And then if there's maybe one more question that's in the chat that we could try to address. I know there's a lot of them going, and I want to assure the group that we will be reviewing the chat. We will put them into categories so we'll know what would be future conversations. This video will be shared and put on the district website. And then at the last slide, once we're done, we'll list a bunch of resources and contacts for crisis, as well as links to our district website. And actually on the district website under the parent portal, our counselors, I know the school psychologists have done this as well, have created pre-recorded videos, kind of like trainings for families and students to watch at their leisure. Some are on mindfulness. I'm trying to think, I printed it out for us. We did mindfulness, how to help your child with anxiety, how to set up a great spot for your child to do their homework. And we're collecting feedback on additional trainings and videos that people can watch. So it's almost like a video library. And that's been new to us because just like everyone else, we've had to kind of think outside of the box and how do we do the work we do and how do we support your children in this time frame, because we miss them as much as they miss you, or as much as they might miss us, we miss them more because we got into education to work with kids, to work with families. And so we're trying to be creative as possible. And we can only do this if we do this collectively, because really there's no other option. We've got a bunch of kids that need us, and we're excited to partner with you to do the work. And I think this is hopefully was a good first start to the panel. I don't know if we want to take one more question, panel, before we leave. I'm kind of looking. Wendy or Felicia, do you see any one question that jumps out that we should kind of capture tonight?
How specifically do we talk to older students, like the teenagers, who sort of naturally are at that point of pulling away from their parents, and a time when they're forced to be with their parents more than ever? I think that's the hottest question out there, is the teenagers.
Anyone want to go for it?
I just kind of said this in the chat, and as a parent of teenagers, you know, it's sort of admitting, yeah, I've had to reinforce you're not in trouble. Everybody's doing this. Don't feel like, you know, you're being penalized for anything. Everybody's in the same situation. Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, it sucks. I try to empathize. I just try to listen because, yeah, it's a grieving process that they're going through. They absolutely should be getting that independence. Those upper middle and high school kids should be pulling away from their parents a little bit and should be gaining that independence. You know, so I try to empathize with them. I try to just listen. I can't fix it. And, you know, I just, yep, it sucks. Yes, it breaks my heart. Yes, it's hard. Yes, yes, yes. But I also try to remind them that this is a moment in time. And while it sucks right now, and while you're missing opportunities right now, life will not be the same thing. Life will change. Life will go back to normal. You will have those opportunities open back up for you. And you'll even get new things out of it eventually. You know, just, I'll stop there. That's kind of how I approach it.
I'll add to that. I think I don't want to assume every teen has a cell phone, but I would like to think a lot of them do. And so sending a text and not requiring a reply, and just like sort of like letting them know, hey, thinking about you, or like if you ever want to talk. This can be done verbally as well, but I feel like, you know, they're always tied to their phone. So it's a great way. They're going to read their text message. But letting them know that the door is always open, because they may not want to talk or show you they want to talk. But no matter what, you can talk to me and I'm going to be here for you, is the message you want to make sure they're hearing from you.
Stephanie, there's been a couple of requests for more information or support as it relates to anxiety and depression, and possibly a topic for our next webinar. But if anyone wanted to address just a few tips, would probably be helpful, because several parents have asked for that information.
Okay. Does anyone want to, I mean, I know that's such a huge topic, and literally we could be on here for 2 hours. But if there's just maybe some key signs or things that maybe we can address briefly, but I believe that will most likely be probably our next topic.
Yeah.
Clark?
Stephanie, can I pop in there 1 minute?
Yes, please
Yeah,
do.
so I mean, I cannot thank this panel enough, just, you know, for coming together and for broaching this topic. I've been trying to, you know, listen very intently to each panel member and the questions and keeping an eye on the chat. But just a couple things that, you know, popped out is that we will continue to put these on, and we could, you know, we can do one specifically for elementary students. We could do one for middle school and high school. I'd like to create something where we have students on and talking about their experiences. And, you know, I think probably one of the comments that really stood out the most is there's this, you know, there's this hesitancy to talk about mental health. And I think the more that we can normalize these conversations and really bring them to the forefront, then the more that we can remove that stigmatism that's on mental health. But I believe one of the panelists said it earlier, is that we're all suffering. Every last one of us is suffering, and it's whatever our personal history is or our current situations, it might either, you know, raise our suffering, or it might lessen it a little bit, but we're all experiencing loss. And so as a district, you know, there was never a manual on how to go through this, on how to address these problems. You know, probably one of the more frustrating things on my end, and I know people out there feel the same way, is the uncertainty. So we may think things are getting better, or we may start heading in a particular direction, and then we pull back, or new guidance comes out, or a new, you know, you know, new set of circumstances from county or from the state or from the federal level, and we're just trying to get through this. So the more that we can come together and talk about these things and address them in a positive nature. I think one commenter put it out as having that growth mindset rather than a deficit mindset. Think about what our parents have accomplished during this time, how resilient they are. Think about our wonderful kids and what they've done, and to have their whole worlds, you know, turned upside down, and you know, and how they're still surviving. Although many of them are not thriving, but they are surviving. And like she said, it's a moment in time. And think about our educators, right? So the more that we can focus on the positive, and the more that we can share accurate information, real-time information with everyone, I think the more likely we are to get through this, you know, still being able to smile and laugh someday soon. So again, I want to thank Ms. Roberts. I want to thank Dr. Aguilia. I want to thank Dr. Stuckey Smith, and I want to thank all of our panelists and the parents who have participated tonight. More to come. I know. When we started, we had 120 people, and then we had 220. And since I've been talking, we've lost 15. So I'm gonna stop talking. And again, this is recorded. We'll send it out. We'll post it on the website. And again, just thank you so much for all that everybody does. Everyone is equal, and everyone has an equal share in seeing that our students are successful. So more to come in the future. And thank you, and have a good night. And let's give a Zoom round of applause to our panel and parents and students. Okay, so thank you.
And we'll close it by putting that resource document on the screen. So I'm going to do a quick screen share. Thank you so much, Dr. Clark, and everyone who joined us. And have a good night. Thank you, everybody.